Thank you very much, friends, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this breakaway session on Pan-Africanism and African spirituality. I guess I'm participating in this because I was part of a group that prepared and thought through a concept paper for this. And that really is what I'm going to share with the rest of the group. And the intention was to locate African spirituality in the context of Africa's historic search for a full humanity and for freedom and for liberation, and in all the struggles that Africa has engaged in. We wanted to problematize the idea of spirituality, but at the same time to acknowledge that spirituality is a factor of existence, is a factor of humanity in Africa, and to recognize what the sources of that spirituality are in Africa. By and large, African traditions and spiritualism, Muslim, Christian, animist religions, all in different ways inform and persuade behavior and conduct and understanding of the human reality in Africa. And so we talked about spirituality in as broad a context as we could imagine, or as we know how it was. The second thing I want to say is that somehow we realized that the participants of Manchester never dwelt on a matter of spirituality in any depth, although we recognized that there was a recognition of it and a mention thereof. And so in a sense, unlike other themes, on this theme, we more or less are operating, if you like, de novo. We are creating something that Manchester did not engage sufficiently. So in some ways, we're looking at spirituality in the context of our day and age, and the challenges and struggles that we face today. And in it, we're looking at it through the lens of the Pan-Africanist movement from 1945 onwards. And that is by way of background in terms of where we are and why this is important. We think it is important. We think it is important because it is reflected in the daily lives of the peoples of African descent everywhere, wherever they might be. It is important because it informed the struggles of the slaves from Africa, wherever they were placed. It is important in many respects because it drew people from all walks of life into the struggles for freedom across Africa and beyond. We think it is important also because it should be informing critically our daily lives today as we face the challenges of our day: development, poverty, climate change. As we speak in Sudan, there is a coup d'etat that is underway as we speak. As we speak, there is resistance in the Sudan. As we speak, the Ethiopia is divided, and the federal forces have been bombing targets in Tigray. So far from the guns being silenced in 2021, they seem to be rambling as never before. And we therefore have to ask the questions. What is the effect and the impact of all of this in the quality of lives and in the ongoing challenges that Africa faces today. And so I think contextually, we do have a big issue before us. We want to understand, and because we know that this is very much a feature of African society by and large, not universally so, but by and large, it's a feature of African society. But we want to understand what does it in fact inform and how does it inform the African consciousness and the African mindset. Thank you very much. I went a little bit beyond a minute, but I was just wanting to place that on the record. Thank you.
Hello. I'm sorry that I was late. I had a technical problem. I'm delighted to be here to be the moderator of this panel, and it's good to see all of you here. I come with just fond memories of Barney.
Yes.
Who I have known for years as we served with the Program to Combat Racism, World Council of Churches. But it's a delight to see all of you here. I want to begin by asking each of you who are the panelists to just give 2 or 3 sentences about yourself. I think it's important for people to hear about you and a little bit about your history and your perspective in engaging in this particular subject. Many of us are aware of the importance, the vital importance of spirituality in the Pan-African movement. And I recall that in 1900, that W.E.B. Du Bois and several other folks met in London as a precursor to the first Pan-African Congress. And in that meeting, they raised the question of the imperialism and of the economic oppression of the white European churches that came to Africa and tried to change the paradigm of spirituality in Africa. And in the 5th Pan-African Congress, many of you are aware that one of the statements that was made in the section on Africa, particularly West Africa, dealing with the issue of colonialization, that again, the issue was raised in terms of the exploitation of the European American church and how it was utilized to really destroy the spirituality of Africans. And so with that, I'd like to just have you start, and I'll just ask each of you to say a little bit about yourselves. And as you talk, just remember Toni Morrison's whole focus as she deals with the question of remembering. Remember what our friend and our ancestor now, John S. Mbiti, used to say, that wherever there is an African, there is religion. And remember all of the wonderful words of our ancestors who could not disconnect themselves with who we are as a people. The sustaining force that has kept us all together alive and dealing with the issue of colonialism and fight against racism and imperialism has been our spirituality. So let me start with you, Bonnie, and if you could just say a little bit about yourself, and each one of you have 10 minutes, and I hope I have not taken too much of your time, but I'd just like to hear you delve into your particular concerns and where you are in this issue. So Barney, let's start with you.
Thank you very much, Tyrone, Dr. Tyrone Pitts, a good friend from many years ago.
Before I start, Bonnie, could we get a recorder? Is there someone on the chat that could do a recorder, be a recorder? Anyone? Do I need to call someone's name?
I think so.
Okay, let me. So the meeting is being recorded.
Oh, it is being recorded?
Yes.
Well, we don't need a recorder. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Barney, for interrupting.
No, let me just say a few words. I come from this matter with many years in the struggle against racism. and then struggle against apartheid in South Africa, particularly, but also elsewhere in the world. I come into this as an academic and as an Anglican priest. I'm now retired and I live in South Africa. But I'm very delighted that we've been able to gather together in this way to commemorate 75 years of the Manchester Conference. And more than that, to be able to look together into the future and see what future can be shaped together for the people of African descent, wherever they may find themselves to be today, and shape that future together. Thank you.
Okay, can we go with the next person? Let's see. How about you, Marjorie?
Okay, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Marjorie Lewis. I'm Jamaican. I'm Minister of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. I'm a practical theologian, probably the practical part, the more important. And I have worked for varying times in not just Jamaica, but also in Britain. I'm currently in Canada, and I had a time on sabbatical in the United States. So I'm informed by all of these experiences. My praxis and my academic interest centers around Pan-African interreligious dialogue. So I've done some work on contextual womanist theology for the Caribbean, which is interfaith. We can talk about that at another time, but and my PhD thesis looked at the spirituality of Black British women in two religions, in Christianity and the Asara Society. So this is my passion.
Great. Thank you very much. Emiliano. Emiliano. Okay, sorry.
Iliano.
Oh,
Yeah.
Iliano. Okay, I apologize to you.
Exactly. Firstly, I want to tell that I don't have a good English, so I don't know if I can speak any Portuguese.
I don't have good Portuguese either, so you don't have to worry.
Okay.
There is an
So
interpreter.
There is an interpreter, yes, so it's no problem. So you could speak Portuguese.
Okay.
Emiliano, you can speak Portuguese.
Ok. Ok, obrigado. A minha relação com o panafricanismo, de certa forma, começa a partir da minha incursão na diáspora. Eu sou um estudante de teologia, sou angolano e emigrei para o Brasil, onde comecei a cursar a teologia, fiz a formação do direito e comecei ao mesmo tempo a fundo em descortinar esse mundo do panafricanismo, buscar ação com o mundo teológico e o seu fazer teológico, sobretudo no continente africano, de maneira a trazer aportes para a teologia africana e a diáspora brasileira. De forma rápida e resumida.
Thank you very much. Yolanda? Are you there? Yolanda?
Sim, tô ouvindo.
Okay. Larissa.
Hello, I'm Larissa. Just to clarify, are we giving kind of full statements or just a quick introduction?
Just a quick introduction, and then we're going to do
Okay.
full statements.
Perfect.
As soon as you-
I'm Larissa Johnson. I'm South African. I grew up in Johannesburg. My family is mostly from the Eastern Cape, and my mum is Portuguese. So I occupy many intersections of South African social life. I am perhaps the odd one out here in that I do not work on religion or spirituality, and I can speak to that a little bit later. But I do work on what I will speak about is African bow music, especially Southern African bow music, and trying to recuperate practices that connect us to ancestors, especially for people like me who are called colored, I guess, in some spaces, who are trying to kind of recuperate their Indigenous identity. So I'll talk about a musical practice that I think can be interpreted as spiritual, but I don't necessarily think about it in these terms. I'm a PhD student in music and Africana studies at the University of Pennsylvania, but I'm joining you from Johannesburg today.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with you, Barney. Could you give us your presentation now, please?
Tyrone and friends, I've already given the presentation really basically, which was both giving a background to why this issue is before us at this conference at this time, and also saying how we tried to construct it, given the realities where we come from and the agenda that we're setting before ourselves, looking into the future. And because I was working with a team in the concept document, I was trying to explain what the thinking that was in that team that put together that concept document. Basically, what we are saying is that we need to acknowledge that the issue of African spirituality or Pan-African spirituality, there is a sense in which it is a given, it is easy, but there's another sense in which it is hidden and is very, very difficult to fathom or may even be denied. But there is another sense, we thought, in which it can be problematized because to some degree, the espousal of a religious consciousness, some of which came from colonialism and other forms of influences that came into Africa, became dominant and became very hegemonic in time. So in a sense, we thought we needed to acknowledge something that was clearly indigenous in African spiritual consciousness that is there, that in some respects informs the religions that have come into Africa since then. And therefore, some of our African identity we felt has not actually been lost in Africa as sometimes we think, because some of that African identity is in the religious practices that are found in our society today, and indeed was in the religious practices that were found in slave communities, because they had to dig deep into their traditional spiritualities, whether from West Africa, from wherever they were, in the Caribbean, in the plantations of the Americas. African people had this sense of identity from their spiritual roots. The second thing I wanted to say is that African spirituality, to the extent that it owes anything to organized religion, it has to recognize that it draws from, yes, African traditional religions, which actually are very, very difficult to call organized in the sense that we know it. At the same time, they have filtered into the organized religiosity of our time, whether it's Christianity and Islam. And we recognize that in Africa, 40% or so of African people and communities embrace Islam. And so Christianity is not in any manner a dominant religion when you look at the continent as a whole, but it is seen in very religious forms and religious places. Accordingly, it is not surprising, we say in the paper, that the way Africans express and entertain their religious sensibilities is of necessity through a syncretistic acknowledgement that in fact it is religion that draws from all kinds of influences to begin to find the identity of what it is that to be an African and therefore a Pan-African in that sense. Having done that very, very quickly in the paper, we then try to say that how then do we understand this consciousness to be informing, affecting the history of resistance and struggle and humanization that Africa has been engaged in consistently over a very, very long time, including through the times of the slave trade, through the missionary periods of other religions. It seems to us that Africans, wherever they be, have been engaged in the struggle for the affirmation of the African personality, of the African being human. And we kind of note that this idea, this persistent struggle of the humanization of the African identity is an ongoing struggle, and there were times when it seemed to fail, there are times when it seems to succeed. But one thing that is true, we say, it is persistent. It has informed a great deal of what Africans, wherever they found themselves, were actually engaging with their environment, with their conditions, with their history, with their social context, wherever they have been, even with those who came into their midst, either as traders or colonialists or whatever they were, what they would be able to take away at that point is the consciousness, spiritual consciousness of Africa. That leaves us, and this is where I want to say, we were very, very clear that we didn't want to leave it at that, because we didn't want it to seem like we were just digging the past. We think that it is important to see how does all of this inform the way we shape our present and our future today as a people of African descent, wherever we might be. I mean, using African descent, if you like, in the way in which President Mbeki used it in his opening address. The idea is it doesn't matter where we are, if we claim our descent in Africa, wherever it places us, whether in Africa or elsewhere, we are still people of African descent. And we're saying that faced as we are today by just enormous challenges, most of which we are participants in as well as African people, and some of which we feel we may be overwhelmed by the powers of our time and environment, where there have been occasions when religion played, not religion, spirituality played an important part. There may have been occasions when spirituality didn't seem to be so important and so dominant. But to the extent that we are seeking to shape our future in this environment we're in, spirituality provides a key component and crux of resistance and shaping the future. And we felt in our thinking that we needed to recognize that in the different environments where Africans were, whether it was resistance, forming and shaping a new community, whether it was the organized religions that Africans put together where they were found in their music, in their storytelling, in their folklore, and all of those things that are important to who we are as Africans. They become very, very important in the humanizing of the African. So we felt that, I said earlier on, Tyrone, that while Manchester raised so many of the other issues, this is an issue that did not loom very large in Manchester. But we want to submit that it was there, but it was not looming large. So that means that this conference has the enormous responsibility today of making a distinctive commentary about where Pan-Africanism is going in a world that is morally and politically challenged. What are the resources? And we wanted to see Pan-Africanism and spirituality as a resource for our humanization as we face challenges today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barney. It's very informative and it's tremendously helpful. Margie, would you now give your report and help us understand where you are from your context?
Certainly, but there was something in the chat saying that we have basically 15 minutes left. So do I have 10 minutes or do we need to?
I would give you 5. If we could just do 5 each, I think we can try to, if you don't mind, because it will cut off. So if you could do
okay, so then I will only be able really to give maybe some headings. I want to start first with a territorial acknowledgement and honoring of the ancestors. I acknowledge that I'm in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people in Turtle Island. I honor ancestors in Jamaica and Nova Scotia. Cacique Cayman, our first Taino chief in Jamaica in 500 years. We're thankful for the vision of unity that the Tainos and other indigenous people share with us. A vision of the meeting of the eagle, the condor, the red-tailed hawk, and the hummingbird. We remember ancestors in Mother Africa who knew God by many names. And we remember enslaved Africans who arrived in Jamaica and the Americas with their understanding of God, and acknowledge the experience of suffering and resilience which shaped that understanding. We honor Maroon ancestors who hail God as Yenkimpong. Maroon and other freedom fighters in the Caribbean, early Africans in Nova Scotia, and we recall the independent and close-knit Black community of Africville, which was established here in Nova Scotia, and the other similar communities built across Canada, Turtle Island. May the ancestors and their descendants on these lands and all the lands we represent here find justice, peace, love, and well-being. My standpoint, I think I already shared with you in the introduction, so I will skip most of that, except to say part of what has shaped my ideas is the experience in the different countries I've lived in, especially around African Liberation Day and other Pan-African events. And that my ongoing project is called Nanish Theology, which is contextualized Jamaican womanist theology based on Nanny of the Maroons as an ancestral mother and icon, and ideas about mothering that have to do with the liberation of the community and a spirituality that is interfaith. So the three main points I want to touch on are the UNIA and spirituality, select themes for Pan-African agency and agenda, and a few examples that I have seen. I come from a point of view that spirituality has different dimensions, a quest for meaning and purpose, both within and outside of formal religious spaces. That the role of leaders is important and the link between the leaders and the people. For the UNIA, one of the well-known slogans was one God, one aim, one destiny. And in other work that I've done, published and unpublished, I've done a little bit of research on religion and the UNIA. So a few points from this beginning investigation. Christianity and religion generally was really important in the UNIA. Some say that Christianity influenced Garvey's oratory style and the role of chaplains in the UNIA, especially Chaplain General George Alexander Maguire, was really important. The UNIA developed rituals, some of which had to do with the UNIA catechism and a format for services. They highlighted the presence of Africans in the Bible and also had a missionary objective, especially to Christianize Africa. Contradictions have been noted about religion in the UNIA, both in terms of how it used white Christianity and how this was contested. But certainly both Garvey and Maguire identified the importance of religion and especially ritual as an important force for unity and cohesion within the Black society. I'll have to skip the wonderful quote I had from Amy Jakes Garvey about religion, but suffice it to say that there were not only Christians, although Christianity was the dominant religion and the dominant rituals, but there were Muslims and people of other faiths within the UNIA. And here in Nova Scotia, where I am, an important development was the African Orthodox Church, which was established in the Maritimes based on the racism that was experienced by Black people coming into the Maritimes, particularly from the Caribbean. So in looking at that and my experiences, there are some themes I think we may want to look at some point. One is where Africans have claimed agency, and certainly the Rastafari and African Caribbean religions are examples of this, where it's not simply reacting, but creating your own space. I think the scope of the religion of inquiry should not just be Christianity. And because of that, I agree with scholars like Anthony Pinn, who wrote Varieties of African American Religious Experience, and Emily Towns, who encourage theologians, not just anthropologists, but theologians as well, to look at a wider scope of the term religion as relates to people of African descent. We need to interrogate who is included, because some Pan-African spaces, in my experience, have difficulty with including some people. So my contention is that all should be included, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, sexual practice, and that Islam and Christianity should not simply be rejected as irredeemably colonial, irredeemably part of the trades, different trades in the enslavement of Africans. But that we need to widen the scope and to embrace intersectionality. Okay. I feel healing from the wounds of trauma need to be pursued I think Joy DeGruy's work on post-traumatic slave syndrome. I don't agree with everything, but why not? I think she has some important points, and we need to look at what are the psychological mechanisms. This comes in the tradition of others like Cross with the psychology of negrescence and so on. I think ethics is probably one I want to write in red, both an interrogation of spiritual ethics in the larger society and also within African spiritual and religious spaces. We have just had an awful experience in Jamaica with a cult that has led to murder.
Yeah.
I think the role of the academy and especially theological education needs to be looked at. I think in terms of using the power to give more space to African traditional epistemologies and not just Western epistemology, to share and engage in research, dialogue, and action. We don't have the luxury of being academics for the sake of academia. We have to be of some use. And so we need to look at the culture. There are some examples. I will note just one because there are lots of Americans here. That rituals don't only have to be in religious spaces. And one of the most powerful rituals of lament for me has been that of the Northwest Tap Collective in tap dancing and lamenting those people who were murdered by the police in the United States. So I think we need to revisit our history. We need to interrogate our current context with research, action, reflection, and dialogue. And we need to highlight and share examples of agency. And I'll end with a question.
Yeah.
Garvey was able to get a Pan-African group going and get a wide and deep organization. Who or which organization currently has that capacity to bring a Pan-African dialogue together?
Thank you, Marjorie. I'd like Venanzo to come in. I'm sorry, I did not mention your name earlier. Please forgive me. It was my head and not my heart. So would you come and talk to us about, give your presentation, please?
No, don't worry. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm Venancio Mwangi Munyiri, a Consolata missionary priest originally from Kenya. I've been in Colombia for the last 18 years. I'm going to do my presentation, to be more precise, in Spanish, as I had told my director, and also in communion with Emiliano. 7 puntos muy breves. Primero, la espiritualidad en relación con el panafricanismo es un lugar de enunciación, un lugar político, ético, cultural, que nos ayuda a ubicarnos como negritud en África y diáspora como enunciación. Segundo, las fuentes de acercamiento a la espiritualidad desde el África de panafricanismo tiene que ver con estas fuentes desde la oralidad, fuentes arqueológicos, prácticas culturales, el simbolismo, los silencios y las ausencias causadas por las teologías y las religiones dominantes. Tercer punto, el binomio panafricanismo y la espiritualidad nos conduce a entender el panafricanismo como la materialización de un despertar consciente, de una lucha y una resistencia, una vivencia y una libertad que libera no solamente la conciencia negra, sino también libera la humanidad y el cosmos en general. El cuarto punto, la espiritualidad desde la perspectiva de la conquista. El europeo no pudo esconder el hecho de que el cristianismo viene siendo la narrativa de la experiencia del hombre blanco, que el cristianismo es una religión de la élite o que otorga una clase social. En síntesis, el cristianismo se le propone al negro y su descendiente como una religión extranjera, Y esto obliga al quinto punto de que nosotros desde el panafricanismo, el acercamiento que le hagamos a la espiritualidad necesariamente tiene que poner a dialogar el proyecto colonial con los procesos de emancipación que brota desde el frente político educativo de las religiones y que permita la emergencia de la novedad que le colocaríamos como una continuación de lo que nos dejó Manchester. Sexto y penúltimo punto. Entender el panafricanismo como el rechazo filosófico, político y espiritual del proyecto del expansionismo imperialista hacia donde va mi proyecto de investigación es descubrir la dimensión política de la espiritualidad. Y para hacerlo, y entonces ahondar en nuestras raíces desde varias propuestas que ahora por el tiempo quisiera dejar allí para ceder el espacio a otro. I'm sorry I had to do it in Spanish, but to be brief so that someone else can continue.
No problem. It was excellent. Thank you very much. And we do have it in the chat, so we're able to see it. Larissa, do you want to have another word? And then we're going to ask Emilio to have another word too, very quickly, because we are running out of time. But would you like to say something else?
I don't really know how to jump in this quickly. It's a lot of pressure when things have been prepared. I guess I can try and you can just cut me off when you think it's going too long. Excuse me. Okay, so I am a flaky atheist and I was very amused by my inclusion on this panel, where I stand in the shadows of highly esteemed theologians. I couldn't figure out initially what to say on the topic of spirituality, but preparing the short notes that follow has kind of clarified my interest in indigenous musical practice in contemporary South Africa as at present as something that is precisely concerned with spiritual hygiene. What I am interested in is the question of humanness, in particular of what that means and what it takes to be human under regimes of oppression that have spanned and accumulated over centuries, and that have made some of the image of man, and have made some in the image of man and others in the image of the beast. What is at stake as it relates to the current discussion is the human being in excess of its biological form, what we might otherwise call the spirit. There is much more to be said on the philosophy of the human and the unhuman. But for now, I want to put this aside to focus on the question of practice, particularly as it is realized through indigenous music making in South Africa. I have a whole section that maybe I should just skip.
Yeah, and also, Larissa, if you could send that in, I think we would be able to really deal with it. We do have an agenda item coming up with Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee in less than a minute. And so I apologize to you, but we are going to have to transition. So.
All right. I think it's better if I just stop there then.
Okay. Do you, Emilio, have anything else to say? Alicia? No? Okay. So then we will stop here and we will turn this over to our recorders to record. I do apologize to you for time, and I apologize to you because I could not get in the chat, unfortunately, and could not get in the room. I'm not technologically astute at this point. I'm working on it, but anyway, just keep me in your prayers as we move forward. I want to thank all of you for your presentations. They have been exceptional. And I just want you to know that we are moving in a very positive direction. And this issue of spirituality and the African diaspora is really going to be a major issue that we're going to take up as we move forward. So thank you all. God bless you, and Asante.
Thank you.